All right, y'all. We are going to talk through the forces subunit 1 experiment number 2. How do forces affect velocity? So I know that many of my students struggle with this a little bit going through this peer curriculum. So I just wanted to walk people through how to use this simulation and just do the simulation with you. So if you can't figure it out, you at least have the data and you know what you're doing here. So in my class, we go to the OneNote notebook. And we're just going to click on this link. It's going to take us to the PhET Colorado website. You do need Java for this one, so if you haven't done that, you're going to have to head on down to that software center on your computer, and you're going to search for Java and install that on your computer. It should be an approved program. I've actually already installed this. I've downloaded it multiple times. So I'm just going to open up this Forces 1D, and then I'll make it full screen as we go through this. It's taking a moment to think about it. So we'll see, this is opening up, and some of the instructions, there's a lot of instructions kind of compounded in here, so let's go through what we need to do. We're going to graph our applied force, so we're going to definitely want to click that one. And what this assignment is looking at how force and velocity are related. So in order to do that, I have to also graph my velocity. Over on this right-hand side, we're not going to look at the total force right now. We're just going to look at the applied force, and we're going to turn off the friction to just make this simulation a little bit easier to get started with. That means that I have all of these different colors on my graphs, which could be confusing. So again, I can go over here to these checkboxes. We're not looking at the total force. We're not looking at friction. It just cleans up my graphs a little bit so I can see a little better. My instructions in the peer workbook tell me to push the filing cabinet to the right and then let it go. So I'm going to do that now. And we're just going to, once that's done, we're going to compare this force graph to this velocity graph and see what we see. So I'm just going to give a little shove. And I don't know about you, but it's kind of hard for me to see what's going on in my velocity graph or my applied force graph. They're a little small. So I'm just going to use these plus magnifying glasses, and it's going to make them just a little bit bigger for me. If this still feels too small for you, when you do yours, you can always apply a bigger force so it's a little easier to see. But really what we're looking at is when the force is applied, what happens to our velocity? When the force isn't being applied, what happens to our velocity? So that's kind of our first setup. You can think about this one, kind of see what's happening. You can zoom in again on these. You can zoom in on the force again. So just some ways to think about that. So I'm going to clear this. I'm going to delete my graphs. The second time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to push that filing cabinet again, heading towards that house. But then what the instructions tell me to do is to go back and give it a little shove back towards the tree while it's still moving. I don't want to shove it so hard that it starts moving towards the tree or completely stops, but I do want to give it a little push, and we're going to see what happens there. So first things first, I'm going to give this a little push, get a little more speed than I did last time. All right, and then I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to apply a force the other way. Just give it a little force. So you can see on my graph down below, I have an applied force down here, and then I have my velocity. So you're going to compare those two, what happens. We can see here that we also have another force, and then we see that something else happens. So really we're looking at the force and the velocity and kind of comparing those results. So that's kind of your goal for this assessment. Hopefully walking through this was helpful for you. There are lots of options. If you would rather push a refrigerator or a textbook or anything else, you're always welcome to look at those. You're more than welcome to look at this with total force or with friction or other things on. But really, this is the most simplified version, so hopefully that helps if you're struggling at all.